Okay, welcome everybody to another SENCE Podcast. It's the 19th of January in the year 2020 here in the Southern Hemisphere on Australia. And we're going to be inviting a number of our regular contributors as well as some special guests on this particular show. And we're letting everybody know in advance that we've arranged with Podbean that there won't be the usual 2-hour cutoff now. We'll be able to probably go anything up to 3 hours if that's the way the discussion is inclined. And we're also letting everyone know that we're sharing the entire live stream as a low-res MP3. We'll send it to you via WeTransfer if you share your email address in the chat window with us. So, what can I say? It's an interesting state of affairs in the sky right now. The sun is in Capricorn, the moon is in Scorpio, and yep, wait for it, Mars is in Sagittarius. So the big question is, who feels like a fish out of water right now? There's a higher sense of emotional displacement that has most of us questioning the validity and the intrinsic truth of just about everything right now. Now, in addition, we have the moon is opposite to Uranus and Mercury is directly above Aquarius, creating what's known in astrology as a perfect T-square. So really the only thing that you know deep in your heart is that if you continue to stay the course, that is the Scorpio focus, and do the work diligently and without questioning your motives as to why, you'll be all right in the end. But will you? Because Mars in Sagittarius brings in the consolidated delusion that nothing means a pinch of shit out there right now. And that's why it's delusional. And that's a perfect and valid rational reason not to trust it. Now this also means that there is no fire in the sky at the moment except for the release point of all this compressive energy in Leo. So the advice for the collective is to focus on just sustaining your balance in the world, which is easier said than done. And I suppose the most important thing to take from that is that we're in a state of displacement and rebirth in 2020, and it's proving to be not exactly what it's all cracked up to be. So part and parcel of tonight's discussion with both Riki and Cory and Greg, and possibly we may even have a brief call in from Cecilia, who's known as Vegetably Aware. You can check her out at vegetablyaware.org. We're going to be talking about the individual feelings of displacement that each one of us are going through right now. And one of the things that's become increasingly clear, particularly to me on a personal level, is that after going through the rather turbulent and somewhat intense energies of the lunar eclipse, the full moon lunar eclipse in Cancer, followed by the stationing direct of Uranus, the maverick planet of change, and culminating in the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, I really had the impression, because of the higher octave of photon light that was being generated and directed at the planet, that we would wake on Monday morning, just past, and feel completely new. And it's been a bit of a letdown to a greater degree. And that's because our expectation and our codependency on what it is that we believe should be happening in our lives isn't necessarily reflected in the way that the present and or circumstances in the now tend to play out. So I think at the end of the day, what we're hoping will take place during the course of this live stream here on the SENCE podcast is the ability to purge our truth by purifying all that no longer truly serves our highest good. And that's not necessarily easy for anyone. So we're going to start at this stage, and we're going to listen to a chat I had earlier with Greg Delapaix in Oregon, who, funnily enough, also had a fairly sort of a letdown of the way that things predominantly played out in relation to the way that he was experiencing his family dynamic, he was experiencing his work dynamic and the colleagues in his work circle, the way that his passions in a recreational field fell very short, and the fact that we really need to try to understand this whole modality of energy, the way that energy is, pardon me, now impacting, the higher realms, and the way that we ultimately work diligently to present our authenticity, to create and generate a real authentic perspective through a lens of detachment and non-dependency, recognizing the interdependence that we all are predominantly growing in the greater scheme of things. And this is different for everybody because depending on, the scope of your dynamic in your social circles and the way that you interact, with third-party interactions, relationships, your partner dynamic, etc., really kind of measures the volume of the amplitude in the way that this part of your own conscious evolution plays out. So I'm going to play this particular discussion that I had with Greg, and then we'll bring on the boys and we'll get stuck into how everybody's feeling, and hopefully we'll be able to invite the audience into a little bit more of a co-creation with us, with the team. So let's take a listen to that now. Okay, well that's good to know, because the question that I have and the question that we'll be presenting tonight on the Seven Sense live stream is the fact that 2020 and the so-called the birthing of the new world in which you are an active counterpart has come up pretty short, and most of us are feeling unbelievably overwhelmed to a greater degree, very displaced, particularly from an emotional point of view. And if we're interacting with a lot of, what we call family and social circles, and even those delusions, attached to being constantly available to social media, then we are being bombarded by ridiculous amounts of third-party drama and maya, and it's making us feel, like which way is up and which way should I go, and who am I taking with me, and what is it that I'm attaching to, and why am I attaching to it? So, Greg Delapaix, what about you, Sunshine?
Very good. Well, we're dealing with new kinds of energy and changes occurring in, as you mentioned before, a kind of a multidimensional spectrum. And in terms of offering something that can be helpful for people undergoing these kind of torque and tension in these times, is to is to work with energy, and by developing, just like someone might develop an intimate relationship with their own breathing or their own breath. The same can be true aside from breathing with working with energy. And as you learn to tune your energy field by engaging directly with it through your own willful effort, you begin to expand your ability to ascertain and make the kinds of decisions or what's the word I'm trying to think of? Different distinctions in terms of how you should behave or how you should act or what you should do, if you should be present, whether you should leave. When you begin to work with energy and develop a relationship with your own bioenergy system, you begin to expand on your ability to have that kind of awareness. And what I would say is, I think what would be really beneficial for so many people is to do what I've been doing of late, which is what the International Academy of Consciousness, I'm not sure if the word is academy, but these are various energetic practitioners and people who work with, also with dreams and out-of-body experiences and things of that sort. But dealing with energy, which is an important aspect of that kind of work, and actually, as we know, energy is an important aspect of any type of work that involves feeling, that involves manifesting change and things of that sort. So what can be done is, when you have free moments in your free time, is to consciously move energy up and down in your body longitudinally, like from your head to your feet and back and forth. And most people are not able to actually feel the energy moving in their body. Some more people that have been doing the energetic work and breath work and things like that, or qigong, or different ways of working with energy can. But even over time of consciously moving the energy up from your feet or down from your head and back and forth, and just continuously do that, you find that you become more balanced, and it's something that can be done anywhere, anytime. You don't have to use necessarily, sound frequencies or rituals or any other type of helping things that can be done too. But I found that just doing that, and I'm not an advanced practitioner by any means, but I found that by just concentrating and moving my energy up and down my body, and it's not like you're trying to do it around your body. It's not like you're trying to pull energy in, because if you're not the type of person who has an energetic awareness that can tell if there are, paratechnologies or parapsychic presences or other entities of the non-physical sort, the idea is that you're moving the energy just inside your body, up and down, and you're moving it at solid sort of movement. You're not doing the arms separately or anything. You're just moving it up and down, and you can start out by taking 3 or 4 seconds to move up and down, and when you get to the head or to the feet, you give it a little push, a little effort of will to push it back up or back down, and you just work it back and forth like that. And that's one way. I mean, there are other ways too, but that's a good way for people to, over time, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It depends on how often you're willing to do that during the day. But not only can you cleanse your energetic self, it's going to ultimately reflect on your physicality. If you can work on that level, on that energetic level, you can ultimately cleanse yourself and also develop that open awareness that allows you to be more discerning and to deal with the kind of energies that are happening on the planet right now.
Well, I think that's very well put, man. I mean, you're talking about moving things through the cosmic channel, and yet the cosmic channel, when you get to this particular point where you're I suppose, integrating. We're already experiencing it. Not a lot of people are really integrating it, but we're integrating this higher photon energy. This is a heightened kind of more sensitive light form that is literally crystallizing the body grid and the cosmic channel within it. And the more that we allow that illumination to take over the...
Yeah, I've got Greg playing at the moment, Riki, so just hang back.
The more available we become to a more
just about
sensitive and a more greater perceived understanding and awareness of our planar reality.
I mean, I agree that it's working on that level. It's working on the cosmological level. We can't just deal with the conscious mind and with the physical body. We have to engage with it on the level that it's acting on us, and doing it in a way that allows for the kind of openness you're talking about.
That openness, at the same time, the negative polarity of it is you feel isolated, you feel misunderstood, you feel as if you're alone in the quest, as I've been stating so clearly on many different planetary transits, particularly, we had the full moon lunar eclipse in Aquarius, and then that followed the following day with the maverick planet of change in Uranus stationing direct, and then that culminated in the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, which was supposedly going to complete the rebirth process. But instead, many of us awoke on the Monday looking in the mirror and feeling as if, we feel lighter, and we feel somewhat more, we've replaced certain points of our value system, how we feel about the external, how we express the landscape of the external, but at the same time there's this kind of overwhelming sort of depressive emotional state where we really don't understand what's taking place within the cellular structure of our beingness, and that's the conversation that we need to have.
Yeah, I think if you can, what I'm talking about with engaging with energy also involves a focus which separates, in a sense, kind of separates you from that. And as you focus on moving energy, the International Academy of Consciousness would call it the intentional or longitudinal, voluntary energetic longitudinal oscillation, like VELO, VELO. When you do that, or even if someone's doing breath work, by focusing on what you're doing and doing that, it cleanses your energy so that you're less apt to be influenced by those kinds of things, and those thoughts that are entering your mind, in the chatter that's going on in your mind, are eventually subside and are quieted down. There's kind of a focus on what you might call the clear light, or the void, or the silence within, or the stillness within the movement. And if that is done in a focused way, it does take some discipline to regulate your thoughts, and in conjunction with certain affirmations, in terms of Robert Monroe's got some great affirmations on some of his Hemi-Sync recordings, where you're communicating directly with your own body, and not thinking of the body in terms of something that's separate from you, that is under all of these various influences that you have no control over. The mind and the effort made with the will and the intent will manifest a calmness and a cleansingness, which can, pretty well counteract some of those things.
So, is this very much kind of embodied within the quantum culture?
The quantum culture?
Yeah, the whole fact that at the moment... Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I would say it is. I mean, there's a lot of... my focus of late lately has been in the out of body experience and working with energy, because I found that working with energy is really one of the key elements of dealing with awareness within the dream state and all the states of consciousness, and just sort of moving beyond five senses. So it's definitely well published nowadays, and pretty well even in academic journals, people are writing about these kinds of things now. So I would say, yeah, it's definitely in the quantum culture, and press is really pretty well represented within the overall, I guess, quantum culture, if you want to call it that.
Well, I think that basically people are starting to understand that there is a fusion taking place and at a higher octave of what we call frequency integration, and it's a culmination of trying to balance the language of science with the language of spirituality, with the meta language of the new millennia and this new decade and this new epoch and this new age they're calling Aquarius, which is really difficult because it's all happening simultaneously within a singularity, and then that singularity is kind of sort of reflecting back through a rather deceptive mirror that kind of creates a perceptive, wrongful interpretation of the way that the plane of reality presents itself. I think that is another real important aspect of the conversation. What do we consider real? How much can we trust in what it is we perceive within the framework of our plane of reality? And, do we work on trying to become expansive within it, or do we kind of nip it in the bud and say, no, this is interference, this is distraction, this is a manifestation of major BS? Let's...
Yeah. Well, I think, memory is very powerful, and memory is always re-inscripting internalized beliefs that we may have. So it's, in a way, it's kind of related to what Nikola Tesla was saying, that, dealing with the universe in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Mm-hmm.
The monumental stone ruins, or the Cyclopean stone structures that are found, all over the world. The ones in South America in particular I have in mind, but or even in Egypt, we see where it looks like there was machining tools used, and this is partly because of our limited understanding or our limited willingness to sort of let go of internalized constructs.
Yep.
Where it's like, some people are saying, like, okay, maybe they had, diamond-headed drills on these things, but even in those times, you could argue, well, they didn't really have metal that was strong enough to not buckle under the power that was required to drill out these extremely hard stone blocks. So, and it looks like it's hard to imagine that some of these stone structures, Sacsayhuaman or Pumapinku or some of these places where it looks like the stone has been somehow turned into putty and formed into these shapes and fit together like jigsaw puzzles. And even to drill through some of these stones, which would be a big test for even some of today's technology, the way some of these things were formed in Egypt, for instance, requires a way of thinking that has to sort of let go of some of the, those re-inscripted constructs, like people have been able to figure out how to levitate very small objects.
There you go. I was waiting for the punchline, Greg. Go on.
and so, what's the next step? Moving beyond it, it would appear that the next level involves working with groups of people with a finely focused consciousness and dealing with subaudible sound and invisible light, and learning how to work or understand engage with the universe on that cosmological, energetic frequency, vibrationary sort of level.
I'll jump in there and simply say what you're doing is you're drawing some form of comparison to the fact that our perception and the way that our thought construct is able to deal with matter in the form of relying on our senses sending these electric impulses of information and data packets to tell us that this is the way something should be, interpreted, and therefore it's interpreted. It's become part of a solidified particle that we've observed, so now it becomes form, and that form becomes consolidated, right? And within that consolidation lies the deception in itself. We can't come to grips with the fact that this stuff was created by a master building race, eons ago for a very specific purpose, and that was to draw our attention to the more lucid state of the wave function, that is to recognize the incredible probability and possibility available once we get past the false ego, once we get past the masks and the masquerades that we're all, frankly, we're so wrapped up in. That's the delusion, because every day, every person on the planet, you and I included, we pull a mask from the ancient wall and we wear it. And we wear it in a manner to disguise our vulnerability, to disguise our emotional instability, our inability to deal. And that essentially drags us back into the student mentality, the mentality of the student, literally being recycled within the construct of the Gaia classroom, time and time again, incarnation after incarnation. Please elaborate.
Well, I would add to that there's a kind of a momentum that's been built up in our co-created reality here, where there's this momentum built up that's constantly being re-inscripted. So there's like a resistance. We are unable to get beyond that, because when I say there's a resistance in a co-created reality, the thought patterns of all of the people around us, and this has to do with that feeling of isolation, are reinforcing the older construct, because not that many people have reached a level of awareness to push us into this sort of new awakened society. So there's that resistance there, and as we learn to more and more engage with energy directly, we can develop the power to manifest these things much more pragmatically and more efficiently. But it's a thing where even in a family setting, or in a place where you're in a well, I don't know, maybe you'd call it a community or a group. There's a certain, I can't quite think of the word, but there's a certain
dynamic.
There's a dynamic that is like, it's kind of like you're trying to walk through water, and getting to working with the mind and energy kind of helps to put you in a finer state, so you're not necessarily struggling against the tide, but you are anyway, because there's all of these thoughts that are out in the world, that are in the minds of people. These thoughts, when they occur, they're electromagnetic in nature. They immediately begin agglomerating and accruing to themselves things that will manifest them just as sure as like a flower is going to grow in the world, a thought is going to grow in the world too. So we have to, while we're in a sense outnumbered, we have to increase, maybe you could say, the frequency or the vibratory rate or the energetic resonance between one another to help push things through. And I mean, this is...
Greg, let's just stop there for a moment and call it what it is. I want people out there to realize that you're either talking it or you're doing it. And there are too many of you out there, frankly, that are talking shit because you're just talking about it, and even in these mass meditations, people don't know how to actually get into the void. They don't know what it is to quieten the mind from the monkey chatter. So they're not really contributing other than, energy follows intention. And I think that's wonderful. Don't get me wrong. But there's just too many people talking and not enough people doing. So let's qualify that. You're either doing it, meaning that you're actually doing the work, you're stepping up to the plate, you recognize the importance of planetary service in a very visceral sense, or you're unfortunately lost in the wash, in the delusion, and you're still stuck on the old timeline, which means that the whole concept of ascension really doesn't relate to you.
I think, that's good. I think there's some truth to that. But I would counter that with, in a similar sense, the idea of working to change the world may in some ways be putting the cart in front of the horse. I think to the extent that we understand ourselves, are we going to understand how we can change the world? To the extent that we, if you want to see peace in the world, you have to bring peace into yourself.
Yeah.
It's not going to work the other way. And, on that level, and I know a lot of people probably view this, or a lot of people that might be listening would view this as a kind of a new age hoo-ha idea, but the way that we view ourselves and the way we have thoughts, feelings, and beliefs about things moves us through different realities. And we, while this reality seems like it's set in stone and we're just dropped into it, that's not really the case.
No.
We move through realities constantly. And it's by sort of, in a way, it's not like turning your steering wheel and making a hard left. It's more like navigating a ship rudder and moving in a direction toward the kind of realities that you want to manifest. And you have to resonate yourself with that reality, or it's not going to appear in your life.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I think we can even dissect it further by saying, in the old paradigm, it was about vertical integration, right? This need to fit piece into piece into piece into piece, whereas regardless of whether it's New Age hoo-ha, as many will interpret it as, it's manifesting and representing itself in a more lateral integration. There are so many other levels to the network that the biosphere is creating that we're all beginning to, at least if nothing else, acknowledge its need for change, acknowledge its need for attention. Now, that doesn't mean that the politicians and the geopolitical manipulists and the centralized institutions that are part of the programmed, grid are going to get with the program and change it, but it does mean that humanity is at least affecting its conscious outlook by wanting to be the effector and not be affected, right?
Right. That connects with, the idea of non-locality, that we are, we're not necessarily just totally encased in these bodies that are a projection, but there's this idea of non-locality, which gives us an unlimited capability. That again, that resistance to understanding that has a lot to do with pre-existing constructs that are constantly being reinscripted.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I want to also go back for a moment because I think this is something that we could really expand upon. When you said that these organizations that actually draw large bodies of people into a collective meditation, because, as you know, intention and attention to intention, energy follows it. Energy follows intention. So, in a way, each individual contributing to a rather larger collective intention is like the cells within a planetary body. Each individual cell becomes affected by the environment, the intention generated in the collective, which creates the manifestation. And to a greater degree, that reinforces what I've stated from the get-go, and that is the rainbow bridge theory and the 13 rays of the rainbow, where the indigenous cultures, and particularly what's happened with the Saturn-Pluto conjunction in the indigenous interpretation of it, it's like we ourselves in the body of the planetary being, and the planetary being Mother Universe, the expanse of the cosmos, and that each higher thought and each higher action that each of us participate in builds a bridge between the heart and the higher and mental and spiritual centers of that planetary being. So we affect the planetary logos with love's liberating light and intention, which is where our energy is then focused, right?
Absolutely. I think, like, consider the idea that, like the other day I was watching the birds at the bird feeder outside the window at my house and listening to the various sounds that the birds were making. And I was realizing that the birds are actually conditioning the atmosphere. They're conditioning the environment via these sounds. Just like whales do in the ocean. They send these, they communicate across these vast distances in the ocean, and at the same time they're conditioning the water with their songs. And so we sort of, as thinking of ourselves in terms of cells within the organs of the earth, or cells as a part of the living Gaia, or the overall or being of earth, we ourselves as cells we can help to produce or become like regulating agencies which condition those around us.
Absolutely. We can influence the environment one particle at a time.
Yeah, or even through on a more physical level with music and song and things like that.
So this is the charging of the ancient song lines with a whole new collective intention for being able to reverse engineer all the problematic and all the the environmental and impactful damage that we've done to Mother Earth. We have this ability to reverse it out of our own cellular imprint, our memory, if you like, and rewrite the future.
I think it's beautiful the way you put that initially, with the idea of singing it into being the way the ancients did, and some still do.
Why don't we? Why is it then that we don't? We sit there and we maybe do the Om, or we do some form of collective invocation or some kind of, resonant harmonic tone, when we could literally adopt a certain level of phrasing or a few choice words, and in a collective state be able to sing that into the earth.
Sure. I think there's so much available that we tend to limit our thinking. Like you look at foods, for instance. People like to say, "Oh, blueberries are a superfood," or grape seeds are a superfood, or whatever. Well, everything is a superfood. All of the food is a superfood. If it comes from nature and it's got that energy to give you, it's the same thing with say someone devises the visual code that everybody's going to focus on and they assign a meaning to it. It's like finding a new way. It's like even along with the old ways of scientific or materialist-based science, Newtonian physics, Cartesian viewpoints, and all that stuff. There's a lot of ancient knowledge which has been sort of held onto and interpreted symbolically or religiously in different ways.
Yeah.
That it too doesn't necessarily have to be held onto either. So we have a lot more freedom than we, generally people give themselves. We have more, we have the ability to do what you're saying. I guess that's all I'm saying. It's not an easy thing to be able to wrap your consciousness around, because it's simple, right,
yet it's incredibly complicated, and I think what we need to be able to say to people is that while we feel somewhat separated and alone in our transition in birthing this new version of ourselves, which is what this new decade, this new millennia, this new epoch, this new age is about, it's probably trying to reinforce one of the most simplistic emotions that we all struggle with, and that is to be able to implement patience in our life. And I'm the first one to admit how much of a loser I am when it comes to reinforcing patience. I got no clue.
Well, I mean, what you were saying, though, about simple actions, in a sense, if you put it in terms of like emergence or thinking in terms of bringing about an emergence or a change, emergence is simple actions done together in ways which ultimately can create a complex response to all of the perceived confusion that's going on around us. So it's like, it kind of also relates in a sense to the fractals, where there's like certain small patterns in nature and in the universe which are reflected again or mirrored in larger and larger aspects. So it's kind of, maybe worthwhile to think of it in terms of emergence and ways that emergence can be brought about. Like another way is to look at, well, of course you look at nature, like there's a word and it doesn't come to mind right now, but a way of matching and mirroring what goes on in nature. Like if you look at the mycelium, the way that the fungi and the mushrooms connect very fine fibers beneath the surface of the forest, they're all interconnected, and they at the same time they are able to break down toxic materials into naturally bioavailable clean, organic systems. And the mycelium, a fine fibrous connectivity in the forest, is actually the largest organism that we know of on the planet.
Beautiful. Yeah, the largest organic neural network on the planet is the mycelium.
Absolutely.
And I love that, Greg, and I really think that is a conversation really worth expanding on, is that we, as we rebuild our cellular memory, are like the mycelium, searching out for the interconnectivity by expressing our more interdependence rather than our dependence. And one thing I sort of said to Riki last week was, during the course of 2020, this word dependency and codependency is going to be a game changer, because the more that we fall back into the old habituated pattern of dependency on the external, on the way that our environment reinforces our conscious outlook, the more lost in our own translation we're going to become, right?
Yeah, I think, do you remember a conversation we had? We were talking about that codependency, and the word transpersonal came up, and I said transpersonal, TRANCE personal. I think that's sort of, that way of shifting our conscious so that we're a little more running at a deeper level.
Beautiful.
Kind of like, transpersonal. But even so with that, the idea of transpersonality is also valid and worthwhile to consider, that we do that as like the way the mycelium does, in the interdependence and codependence and all of that. We function more and more as a unified, sort of integrated system.
And how do we reinforce that as far as the repetition? Because as we know, mantra in particular, which is repetition, reinforces a certain type of pattern that allows us to, catch ourselves in the moment when we're falling back into, the masquerade of egoic expression or the presentation of the false ego.
Absolutely. Mike, I have to run. I just realized I played some music tonight, and I left some of my stuff in the venue there, and they're getting ready to close. I got to get my stuff because I need to take it with me to San Francisco later this week.
All right, brother, no problem.
Okay, Mike, I really enjoyed it.
Okay.
Talk to you soon.
Cheers, bro.
Bye-bye.
Bye, mate.
So some fascinating and illuminating insights there from Greg. I think we all agree, where we're all trying to make head or tail of how we feel, because we're all predominantly living in this deluded dream and we're trying to find ways to ultimately, make sense of it without falling into the kind of illusory shape that our senses create, because that kind of drags us deeper into the deception. All right, I'd love to get the boys online now and have a chat about all this. So if we could get both Riki and Cory to call in, that'd be really, really good. And I just got a message from Shannon in Thailand as well. Hello, Riki. Can you hear me?
Hi, mate. Yes, indeed. Gotcha.
Okay, one sec. Hey, Cory.
Hey there, Mike.
How we doing?
I'm doing okay. That conversation you had with Greg was really fantastic, I thought.
Thank you. I think there are some really powerful illuminated insights there, and it's great to have both of you, online with me again, and we may be joined by a very, very empowered young lady from Thailand shortly as well, we're just working out how we're going to make that happen. But in context to what we just heard and the conversation that we had earlier today, because we're all feeling very, very different 18 days into 2020, starting with you at the moment, Cory, where you've been, and I've noticed that you've been doing a number of different live streams with Jim and with Raphael and some really, really expansive stuff overall. But where do you sit right now within the framework of what's happening in the bigger picture of things?
Yeah, so it's hard to sort of maintain perspective, especially if you're a person who sort of feels these big shifts happening in a fairly acute and very personal way. And I find myself kind of struggling with that cycle because reaching out to various people literally around the world, it was clear a couple of weeks ago that, there's something big happening and different people have different ways of expressing it. But there were all of these like hyper synchronicities happening for everyone. And I talked to mostly people who experienced it, but different people use different languages for it. So there was this sensation that, oh my gosh, these big shifts are happening. And I think when you feel those moments, they release kind of the endorphins and the energy in your body, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And just the feeling of shift itself causes a sort of positive surge of adrenaline in your system. And then when you kind of come off the edge of it and it goes away, you're like, well, what happened? Is life that different after all of this? And I think, for me, the issue is sort of how to balance these. I'm a person who feels bigger shifts in emotion, and a lot of my journey has been, trying to figure out how to balance that, because you still want to experience the highs, but I think just the sort of recognition that if you're going to experience those highs, there are going to be balancing lows. And in this moment, actually, I'm sort of grateful. I'm very grateful to have this conversation, because kind of checking in with the sort of people around the world, we're all sort of experiencing this downslide after this big moment. And actually, it's conversations like this that are helping us sort of check our math and say, okay, well, you're feeling down too, so let's have a conversation about that. That is sort of the parallel or the shadow to the big shifts are coming. What are we going to do in this big shift? I think this is sort of important to do as well.
Absolutely. And Riki, I think that, talking about what we were, discussing yesterday and how we feel that the whole kind of outside world, the 3D construct, it impacts us in such a way that it's really upsetting the balance, and it's creating a rather kind of turbulent, ocean of conscious sort of ness at the minute. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I think we need to be able to try and stay balanced within ourselves. I mean, that's like my key thing at the moment is as if we're at the center of the universe, as if you are the center of the galaxy yourself. And it's a lovely place to be in, because obviously you're not so affected by outside things. The more you can meditate, be okay with your emotions, be okay with these waves, these ups and downs, and sort of find a way to smooth it out. And yeah, there's so much impacting us from so many different angles, but and I do feel like we're moving into a completely different reality, which is the weird thing that's coming to me at the moment is about there's two timelines. There's like this path of the old ways and where we just get lost, and that's still there. That's still available. And I think more than ever, now is the time to really, drop all the things that are holding us back. Drop the addictions, move it into our most powerful self. And in that state, we will find, on one level, we can't tolerate the madness of the normal world as much. But on the other scale, we become stronger and we can kind of deal with it if we've got to, So I think that's where I'm standing on it. I know not to put myself in unhealthy situations, which really, just going into the average town is an unhealthy situation, And it could be said, oh, well, that's part of trauma. And yes, it can be part of, people who are sensitive or have trauma. Yes, they do avoid difficult situations like that. But it's not just that, because, the soul doesn't really want to be here in these environments, these...
well said.
The noise, for one, the noise, the traffic noise, all of these things, we think they're little, but really, are we, we're numbed out enough to actually not really be paying attention, to what's going on. And, so, becoming more sensitized is like a real way forward in being able to discern and know, what's important now, sort of thing.
And that's being reinforced by the north node of the moon in Capricorn, which is essentially this sort of, how much can I handle? Where am I going to prioritize? How do I set the amplitude of experience so that I understand, where I'm going to put my energy and my attention and not feel like, totally overwhelmed by everything that's happening all at once, right?
Yeah, it's so important to try and, as I say, get that balance and that focus, because not many humans have real focus, and I think some people do in various different ways. There's people in the sports sort of realm, and they train themselves to be very focused in one way, but then, you'll find, oh, well, their emotions are all over, or their mind's all over, and, I think that humanity hasn't been in that state of balance for a very long time, So it's easy, of course, to feel a bit like, oh my God, what's going on with the state of the planet, And again, I've been feeling that more so lately. But, it seems to me the higher vibration you're in, when you're on your good days, you're feeling really good, then it feels like, oh, everything's going to be all right. And, everything will sort itself out for the generations to come, not just me, And that's that sort of light energy that you're in. And, then you do something, whatever it is, maybe you get really drunk or, whatever people do. And then you sort of, get lost later on or realize you're getting lost, And so it takes determination and constantly getting yourself back on the track, to really stay focused. And I think focus is such an important thing for general humanity at this time, with the chaos that's going on,
Yeah. I think you're absolutely on the money. And the fact of the matter remains is this is really playing on our emotions. This is really, revealing the vulnerabilities that, exist within the human psyche right now. It doesn't take much to trigger us. It doesn't take much to make us reactionary. It doesn't take us much to, be forced to reveal our authenticity and how pissed off we are when somebody does push our buttons. And instead of holding that in and suppressing it, we've got to be absolutely transparent and honest, regardless of the way that, it's perceived in the spiritual community as, oh, you're judging the situation and, you're allowing the circumstance to override your higher. What a crock. At the end of the day, we're human. We're in this transhuman experience at the moment.
and it's a tough call. And Cory, I know that you're listening and you're nodding your head there going, dude, totally, man, right? Because this is essentially the battle. And if we're already only 18 days into January of 2020, this highly illuminated, this highly immersive year, as Greg was saying, oh my God, right? I mean, this is some fucked up shit.
Yeah, the thing that really struck me while I was listening to you and Greg talk, and then kind of continuing into your conversation with Riki, is that there's at the center of life is paradox, right? Like, if we're going to look at the metaphors behind quantum mechanics as sort of a consistent metaphor that works on kind of a fractal level,
absolutely,
at the bottom of this is a paradox, and the idea of paradox is uncomfortable and confusing, and it's funny because it's recursive, because it is the process of balancing your feelings about paradox, which is itself a paradox. That kind of strikes the core of everything that's going on. And I think every day we're hit with more and more information, and it's not just information from one day to the next. It's that each day brings a larger volume of information. And you talked about different timelines, and I think some people tend to see them as next to each other or on top of each other. But it's important to sort of understand in the picture of the universe, there are many different timelines intersecting themselves all the time. And I think maybe rather than looking at as two different timelines or moving from one timeline to the next, maybe start looking at it as how complex and knotted all of the timelines are and how dissonant they are, rather than sort of bringing everything into sort of a harmonic, navigable, mutual timeline. And that's the sort of balancing of the paradox and balancing these ideas that I'm sort of working out how to approach myself, you know.
Okay. We're just going to take a little break for a moment. We've got a gentleman on called Meet, and he's asking us at the moment that he's from India, and he hasn't got great English, but he's feeling really emotionally overwhelmed and quite sort of like stuck in the middle of the paradox, as you were saying, Cory. So I'm just going to reiterate so he can hear it for himself. We're talking about the displacement and the rebirth in 2020 that really hasn't kind of shown up the way we thought it was going to be. We've had more displacement and less rebirth, or the rebirth that we're having is somewhat in a painful way, right? And this is supposed to be the new age of Aquarius. The Aquarius is this immersive, collective, sharing, higher octave of self-expression. And it doesn't feel that way. We feel overwhelmed by a heavy emotional state. We're trying in a way to kind of explode the myth that everything, can be dealt with, in a diligent spiritual manner, which we're learning is a crock, right? There's so many languages intersecting right now within the whole framework of the construct of the today and the now, that we are really struggling with that, right? We're struggling trying to, it's kind of like, I think it's the concept of singularity exploding all around us and we don't know how to take it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So let's go there. Let's go there. Let's go hard. Let's talk about this, because I think that before we even get into the expansive nature of the collective, we've got to deal with the individual.
Space and time are the same thing, right? We know that it's really just about kind of distance, right? Distance in space is distance in time. One of the things that I've really been thinking about lately is this kind of concentric set of rings expanding outwards and outwards. And when you sort of take away the difference between space and time, you look at your own self as being closest to you in space-time. And then the events that are transpiring, especially when we're sort of looking at this big sort of event or this big transition we feel like we've just gone through, that's kind of on a closer concentric ring to the rest of 2020, which when we look forward, it's hard to feel anything but sort of dissonance when we look, kind of further away. And I think the idea is that we need to sort of develop the idea of being able to look at the largest ring and the smallest ring at the same time, and understand that those two things may be kind of fighting with each other and dissonant, and you have to find some comfort in understanding that happens. And I think that everyone's focus on work on oneself is valid in terms of being sort of like the first part of dealing with all of this. And that's something that personally I struggle with, perhaps the most here. But yeah, I think learning how to look at those dissonance in the distance of space-time from oneself is perhaps helpful in visualizing the whole thing rather than just sort of feeling the onslaught of dissonance at the local level.
What do you think, Riki?
I think that there's a lot of complication in our modern world. There's so much information coming in. We're living in crazy information age. And, me, myself, I keep being like, I'll look up that, I'll do this, do that, whatever, and there's a calling for simplicity. This is why, like, some of this new music that's out, which is like 3 chords, but they're just singing something, the deeper resonance, just singing from the heart, and it's just very simple, to relax. And it's almost as if, the mind thinks, well, if I understand this, then I'll feel better, if I get this, if I get that. And it's like, this information sort of pulling us about all over the place, and I think people are almost getting lost in not being able to actually connect to their inner, understanding and their inner knowing, which is just simple in the moment. It just, we know what we need to do in any moment, and I see it as, this emotional pulled aboutness and, not knowing what's up or down is partly related to that, the internet world as well.
Yep.
And just that humanity has got so ungrounded, I think that's a good thing to say at this point, because, we used to live tribally on the earth, our feet planted on the earth, and of course scientifically there'll be reasons to say, why that's good for you, it's healthy for you, connecting with the earth and all that. On many different levels, So, there's this chaotic sort of energy, and I think that's what people are feeling. And also, I think globally there's this sense, that what we're doing to the planet, we're destroying, I don't feel too bad about that in general. I've managed to find a way to accept what happens, like whether we completely destroy ourselves or not. Because I have a deep understanding inside that life is obviously beyond this planet, and life will recreate itself, and
it already has.
Universe of life.
It already has. We've already been through 4 complete extinctions. So this coming one, which we're going to talk about what's known as the massive solar flash and flare that is due. Was earmarked for 2080, but is now looking to be brought forward because there's a new secret space program revolution and information purging and release that's bringing this into the timeline around 2039. And after that, there is usually a massive spiritually kind of aligned and aware kind of catharsis that takes place as well. And because this is a long, detailed podcast, I've negotiated with Podbean and said, look, when we're getting into the flow of it, you're cutting us off. I'm going to cancel my account. And they went, oh, look, okay, we'll go in and we'll give you up to 500 minutes. And I think we're all going to be dead and buried after 200 or 300 minutes as it is. But the point is there will be an opportunity to share another audio that comes from a film
which was self-financed by Cory Good and David Wilcox, and most people out there in the, in the information age will know who these individuals are. Graham Hancock is another one. And they made a film called The Cosmic Secret. It's only available in America and Canada. Unfortunately, we can't get it here in the Pacific, Australia and the Pacific, Asia Pacific. Can't get it in England. I don't think you can get it in Europe either. But it is available as a 24-hour purchase on Vimeo. And I really felt that because Cory Good is a whistleblower from the secret space program, having worked with the American government and Area 51, blah, 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 and all that, kind of the disclosure project, if you like. And David Wilcox has been a strong advocate of quantum mechanics and the whole quantum leap that humanity has been going through. We have to negotiate and navigate our way through the maze of this dissension and disunity that we're being bombarded with through this overwhelming nature of information and, and the turbulence that it creates, in order to be able to start seeing this beautiful new bed of trees through the smoke. They used to say, oh, you can't see the smoke through the trees. I'm sorry, but that doesn't work, does it really? It's a nonsensical approach to something very practical. You can't see the trees because there's smoke obscuring your view. And in a way, that's really the kind of painful rebirth. It's like the frequency of the world is painful at the moment. It's hard to handle, right?
Yeah.
So, Cory, you understand, I think, a little bit more about the whole kind of, how everything moves in cycles, how everything is essentially part of a repeat and or recycle program. We're very good at doing that, and that ultimately there is a certain amount of sentient entities working closely with humanity right now, and much less of the so-called darker Kabbalist type of outlook and the secret societies and all of that. They're somewhat losing their footing. They're somewhat losing their base of prominence, and people are seeing through the BS. Would you care to kind of, really expand upon that a bit more?
Well, it's interesting because it's like one generation's pure knowledge becomes the next generation's BS in a way, right?
Right.
Like we're all struggling to sort of make sense of it, and I think really the purest way to look at it is that it's impossible to ever fully make sense of the universe because it is the unknown which is at the core of consciousness. So in a way, again, it's this paradox. You have to be comfortable with the fact that you'll never get all the answers, but at the same time, you don't want all of the answers. And I think all of the subjects that you just brought up, the, higher powers and secret societies and all of that, there is a connective tissue to all of that. It is sort of what I like to think of as sort of the geometry of higher consciousness, in that you can, to me, this is the sort of fractal basis of all of this. I think the sort of one cliche that, you bring up that people bring up in these sort of circles all the time is, we are the universe experiencing itself, right? Like that you can see this as one giant interconnected wave function that is itself a kind of consciousness, but alone it doesn't have the same sort of relatable consciousness that we do because our consciousness is based on the unknown. Now, I do think that as evolution has is always changing us, that our sort of view in terms of how far we can see into the future and into the past changes. So it's not like the distance from us to the unknown doesn't change, but there is sort of a need to acknowledge that the separation between different nodes in the consciousness that we are is sort of important, or at least a currently accepted fact of the nature of reality that we're in. I think from my personal experience, from the sort of patterns that I see in everything that I read, that there is a way of becoming initiated into sort of a higher understanding of the nature of reality that some people either aren't ready for or just never are interested or even need to know, that people really do enjoy the complete mystery of being in the sort of small radius of reality that they live in. And once you sort of climb up a ladder to, if you would like to call it a next level, I don't think it's necessarily inherently good sometimes, but once you see it, it really becomes impossible to unsee it. And I think that, we started talking in this conversation about how we all saw this thing coming and we all have the letdown. I think part of that is this sort of illumination that you see in the shape of things as you move up this ladder, if you will. And there are people who are completely oblivious to this thing that we just sort of experienced.
Yep.
And I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing. So a lot of people have this almost all secret societies are bad kind of opinion. But I think in a way it sort of protects us from having too much knowledge, because there are definitely days where I wish that I hadn't seen everything that I've seen, because there is no way to unsee it. And there's something that happens when you understand that, this idea that we're all one collective consciousness isn't just sort of like a woo-woo new age thing, that it is a practical, actual thing. Like, I've been working on sort of a longer form, here's Cory's theory of everything, and there's part of, this thing where you see, just to sort of bring this weird story into the middle of a conversation, because I'm kind of trying to figure out how to relate this to people.
Okay.
But, there was this, since we're talking about secret societies, a long time ago, I sort of asked a friend who, the Freemasons have that whole to be one, ask one, right?
Uh-huh.
If you've ever seen that before.
Yeah.
And just to be clear, I've never been part of any sort of Freemason, establishment, or I've never gone to a meeting, or this is the only conversation I've ever had with a Freemason about Freemasonry, really. And I said, and this was around the time that I was first starting to sort of see archetypes and the sort of quantum connection between archetypes and the shape of the universe. And so I sort of had this sort of feeling, and I asked him, so is there anything weird, is there anything weird to this, or is it just an old boys club? And he was kind of like, nah, at the day, like there wasn't anything sort of strange or mystical about it. And then several years later, I had this conversation with someone who, it was just this in-person conversation that was profoundly synchronistic. And it just this one conversation brought together so many things from different areas of my life. And he was a complete stranger, and I've never encountered this guy again. It was just this one sort of conversation that another person introduced me to this person. And the two of us were sort of alone in a room at one point. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, and he kind of looks at me strange, and then he does this mannerism, and it's impossible for me to explain, and that's kind of part of this. That was what this other guy from years ago, it was this thing. It was like he was doing an impression of my friend from years and years ago, doing something that only that person would have done. And then he looks at me and goes, "Is that it? Did I do it right?" It was the weirdest thing, and I was like, oh, this is something.
So he mimicked somebody that you knew's behaviour to a T,
that's exactly right.
And you picked up on it, right?
I get that right. Yeah. And so, there's a part of me, it's like, should I even tell people? Am I outing a secret of Freemasonry? But I think, in sort of the larger pattern I've seen going on, and there's other conversations I've been privy to which aren't specific to Freemasonry, but definitely people who go deeper down those rabbit holes than I ever have been, that are very parallel to that, and lead me to believe that, okay, there really is something here, and that and there was other coded things in that conversation that later conversations paid off, And I would, and I have theories about why this works and, who, quote unquote, the initiated is and why, in my long story, how I got to that place. But, out of context, it would take me hours to try to explain it. It would be imperfect when it got there. But that one little thing, plus the kind of different conversations I've had that have run in parallel, lead me to believe that there's something there. And the sort of conclusion that, that I've come to, and this is, I've put this pattern together from various different sources, that, we really are just kind of like, and we had this conversation actually, these radio receivers, like DNA is just our radio receivers.
There you go.
We're channeling these various, the way that I say it is, it's Godheads and vessels. Is that, each of us is this unique location in multidimensional space-time that is different than the other singularities we call individuals that we're communicating with.
Yeah.
But that it's those sort of biological radios in connection with tuning in different channels of interstellar energy. Like, this is not, I'm trying to keep it out of the woo-woo range and just sort of say, no, stars transmit regular pulses of energy and regular, pulsar stars, all of the
beautiful
celestial bodies. Yeah. And planets reflect that energy, right? So when we're talking about astrology and stuff like that, there's a pattern to all of these energies that by what we consume, the way that we're sort of facing, all of these different things can actually kind of tune in these different frequencies. And I think that it's it's basically a hierarchy, that these things that we've come up with in terms of, civilizations over time kind of find and lose in terms of gods and goddesses and all of this is basically the fractal geometry of the universe's consciousness. And whether or not in a way that we can sort of relate, like, this thing created us, or it's just the nature of it, really doesn't matter when you sort of understand acausality in time.
Yeah.
But that there are different levels of consciousness, and the more you know about, the universe in terms of the flow of time, the less mystery there is, and in a way, it's like the less interesting it becomes. So when we sort of look at these things together, the thing that happened to me, it's like, oh, okay. So I'm having, communication in a way which is suddenly two-way. Like, it's this thing that, normally the sort of fractal geometry of gods and goddesses seems to be sort of one way. But, most of the religions say that you can have a two-way communication with God, or in terms of Christians, have this Trinity kind of setup, which is multiple gods in one.
Yeah.
It's a way of focusing one's energy and having a what seems like a real human communication with the cosmos. And I think that, that's a sort of like, because it's fractal and recursive, you have them as the sort of the particle and the wave in the Christian language. This is just sort of the fundamental thing that I've come to believe, that the particle and the wave and the collapsing of the wave function is God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. And it's just different words to sort of deal with the same sort of hierarchy of energy. But that, kind of below it, you have this hierarchy of other geometrical consciousness, right? You have the main consciousness, which quote unquote knows all and is omnipotent, and then below it you have these hierarchies of hierarchies of hierarchies of different level of consciousness, until maybe on the bottom level you have bacteria or something, mm-hmm. And we can't maybe communicate with our bacteria, but really we're the thing that all of the bacteria rides through the universe, So in a way, we are the sort of godheads to the bacteria below us. So
it's like the mycelium. It's like the way that Greg
exactly.
and I were talking about the mycelium. It's the ultimately largest neural network, and yet
Correct.
It has its own interdependence. It has its own conscious outlook in the way that it expresses itself as part of the earth. And yet we have no clue as to the higher level of frequency that it's operating from, more or less,
or lower level. It's just, I think that the thing is, it's a different shape in space-time. When you look at the actual, when you look at the biological and cellular makeup of mycelium, it's simpler than the complexity of, a mammal, but at the same time, that probably provides it a more parallel way of processing. So this is one of the distinctions that I'm really sort of, I don't know that I'm attacking so much as I'm trying to balance out with people when we have these conversations. When you talk about different types of consciousness and different views of reality, it's not so much necessarily delusions and lesser or greater, it's just different, and how do we live more harmonically in the center of all of these crazy,
but we're not,
shapes.
Corey, we're not.
Energy.
That's the point, right? We're not.
Yeah.
We're not handling it. We're not dealing with it. We're running away from it. We're shirking the whole
of course,
thing.
but that's also, at the same time, you also have to add the optimism that this very conversation, a few months ago, you and me and Riki and Greg and the people listening didn't know each other. So the very fact that, in this moment of sort of semi-crisis, we're coming together to sort of like try and find this combined language, because that to me is what this is really all about, is language. Everything right now.
Everything is language, and the reinterpretation, the recalibration, the reconfiguration of how we take our personal sense of expression and we relate in the higher dynamic of our third-party interactions with other people.
Yeah, just for people listening, as an example, sometimes the words you use make me cringe just because I don't come from the same sort of background. But that doesn't, but then I just sort of like let go and I listen to the energy of what you're saying, and I know there's a truth there, even if our language centers are different. And I think that, this is a huge wake-up call for me. I talk really fast and use lots of words that, people around me don't understand. But over the course of my life, sort of looking backwards, I see that people just respond to my energy and my enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And don't understand a thing that I'm saying sometimes.
Look, man, you're still out there. You're stepping into the illumination of what's available to you. You're being lucid in the moment. You're allowing probability and possibility to drive your whole organic focus. Right, not getting locked up in the AI signal, which is dissolving our brains right now. The ridiculous amount of subservient activity that we all have to social media and egoic gratification, and we need to feel like we're two halves make a whole. And as you said earlier, it doesn't work. It does not fit into the expansive nature of what we have the possibility to be. We are suppressing that.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying we are suppressing that. So let's bring it back full circle and so we can get into a kind of an extension. How do we navigate this rather distorted frequency that we were thinking was going to help us to have this very, very blissful outlook in 2020? And yet, as the planets and their transits have proven, it's become completely rather a paradox of a greater delusion. Riki, would you care to jump in here, man?
Well, we're looking for these pivotal moments. Humanity, I suppose, has always been like that. And there's an eclipse. So I mean, this is great. The planets do affect us, but there's the build-up, there's the build-up of putting all your energy into something that you deem to be really important. And what was interesting for me, because I had that cold at the beginning of the year, and also I had no need to do these sort of, New Year's resolutions or set anything in stone, but just sort of, rather continue to just allow myself to become more conscious and allow every day to be a change maker, making these changes every day. So, it's almost sometimes like as if we really want something to be a sign or something to say, from 2020, this is it, everything's all different. It's all different. But, people have been saying this for, years and years, like when this happens, blah, 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 it's going to be amazing, and there's going to be no darker energy on the planet and all this stuff. And I don't know, like, it's like polarized thinking, a lot of that, you know, that you know, it's going to be this one way when this happens, you know. And I just feel like that was interesting for me, starting this year like that, not on a high. And that's like the first time it's ever happened. You know, other times I was like, I'm going to quit smoking. Yeah. I'm going to do this, you know. Yeah. This is going to be the best year ever, you know.
I think we all go through that, but that's part of the delusion, I think, you know, and that's why it's worthwhile expanding upon it and realizing that, you know, the way that we perceive energy as a whole, abstract or otherwise, has changed, right? We have this ability to move it around and manipulate it and dilute it and raise it and, you know, amplify it and suppress it. We have this incredible plethora of ways of being able to move and manipulate energy now in any given moment during the course of our crazy day, you know?
Yeah, true. I mean, you know, working with the moment has obviously always been one of the most powerful things to do. But, you know, it's interesting, we create these markers, you know, these event markers, and, you know, before this point, well, I'm not going to make any effort, but when it gets to 2020, then I'm going to, you know, that's the new year. And it's like, well, really, if you really want to make these changes, then you make them now, you know. But energetically, you know, working with life and you know, it can all happen in this moment and everything, because obviously our teacher, so the experiences that we're having, you know, are all here to teach us. But, you know, obviously, as you know me, Mike, my concern is all the time is about how can I stay awake? You know, how can I stay, you know, conscious and really feeling, what's the word, just receptive to life, receptive to the moment, receptive to others, you know, not too caught in the mind and all that. But yeah, you elaborate, Mike. Keep us on track, because I don't want to...
No, it's perfect. It's because it brings us finally back to where we began. And that is, you know, it's not what we perceive it to be. And we should stop worrying about trying to solidify a thought into a pre-existing form, because we're just going to be wrapped up in its diluted state. We're going to be more disappointed when it doesn't necessarily play out the way we would like it to. I mean, people are triggered with just words in a text. I don't text people anymore, because it's like, well, hang on, I'm operating at this octave of self-expression, which means I'm not trying to fall into the me, myself, and I, you know, self-evaluation syndrome all the time. I just want to be able to get a piece of transitory information through without creating some form of negative trigger with people. And it's just really hard to do right now. And that's why I'm saying I just don't think we should sugarcoat it. If you're not doing the work, if you're not diligent, if you're not finding a way to kind of create a certain amount of stillness and balance and be in the void and avoid the monkey chatter and displace yourself or detach yourself from all of the third-party interaction, drama and mire of other people, I'm sorry, you're just going to become an echo of it, right? You're just going to be an echo of it. You won't be transmitting the highest octave of your intention to the universe, because you'll be wrapped up in someone else's delusion. And therefore, where's the bliss? How can you be happy? How can you feel satisfied? How can you feel as if you're moving forward in the conscious spectrum of being I'm sorry, it just does not work.
If I can just pick up, I'll get you, what Cory was saying, you know, about that we're transmitters and receivers.
Yes.
And in regards to what you were just saying about, you know, obviously, you know, you get a text in and then you say something back which is non-judgmental, whatever, and then there's still reactance, you know, and you're thinking, what the hell's going on? You know, why are people reacting so much? And, you know, I do feel like we're transmitters and receivers naturally, and, you know, this is just, there's no evidence for any of this. It's all just speculation. Well, it's more felt out sense. You know, I have a strong sense of these things, but
Well, if you're light in vibration, Riki, if you're light in vibration, of course you know that this is the way that we are perceived, you know, in the greater expanse of, you know, cosmology, you know. There's no body, there's no walking around, it's all illusory, it's all part of the holographic bullshit, you know, at the end of the day. We're not having this conversation, there's nothing visceral about any of it.
Oh, you're messing with my head, Mike. No, I just wanted to say, if you take it back to Lemuria, you know, we were, we used that psychic sense to understand what each other was saying, you know, and I don't know whether there was language spoken or not. But point being, you know, as we raise into, you know, the true identity of who we are, living on a soul level and speaking on a soul level, you know, when you send that text, and when you get a text back from them, they understand what you mean, you know, and that's the kind of world I think we will be moving into. Where
I agree. Yes.
Truth is understood, you know. You just know that, well, yeah, my mind might be saying that this person's messing around in this text, you know, but actually they're not. I hear the truth of what they're saying, and I'm just going to ignore the illusion which my mind is telling me, you know.
Jesus Christ.
Look, it's an important point, I think.
I think it's an important point. I think we all agree that there is a quantum leap taking place, and we have to ascertain that the environment, the way that the self-expression is predominantly now amplified in this environment of our understanding is not the same as it was when we first came across it, when we first perceived it in our plane of reality, because this is not our plane of reality anymore. I believe that we are experiencing a more visceral reality in our dreaming state. And then when we come into the waking state and re-enter the spacesuit as embedded programmed consciousness, that's when we start to live within the wider framework of the delusion. Cory?
Yeah, so one of the things that strikes me is that, you know, finding a focus on how to move forward is one of the things that, I don't want to say consumes me, but certainly drives me.
Yeah.
Because, 2-3 hour podcasts are only going to change the public's perception somewhat. I think there's a case to be made for the organic flow of this information, but the people who are willing to partake in this conversation by listening or by having these long conversations is such a small percentage of the population. So, you know, I'm constantly trying to figure out, well, what do we practically do to sort of move this conversation into the mainstream? So the sort of thing that I'm focusing on is the Tower of Babel aspect, the idea that really language is not what we think it is. It's not just German versus English versus Japanese, that even within English, that we're really not communicating even when we think we are.
Right on.
And then sort of connecting that into the sort of delusion and the multiple timelines. One of my theories is that, you know, all of these famous myths, especially, you know, I was raised in the Christian Bible, so I constantly go back to that, are actually really profound metaphors for evolution.
Yep.
And one of the things that frustrates me is that, you know, the conservative interpretation of this religion, which, you know, I was sort of raised in, doesn't actually even believe in evolution, so you can't even make that connection. That sounds like something that is heresy to them. So that's meta, because that's part of the communications gap that I'm sort of trying to get through in that particular realm. But I think the interesting thing is, if you look at the Tower of Babel and the sort of fracturing of, you know, I'm assuming that everyone's listening knows the story, but just to recap, you know, at some point in ancient times, mankind decided they wanted to build a tower all the way up into the heavens so that they could, you know, be as God, essentially. And then as they reached a certain height on the tower, God basically split their languages into multiple languages so that they could no longer communicate and continue to build that tower to heaven. And I tend to look at this almost like the Atlantis story, that you look at it as the point kind of continuing to sort of combine all the things we've been talking about, when you get a little too close to either too divided from each other in terms of your common goal, or you get a little too close to this sort of like eternal truth that would then make consciousness itself irrelevant, that there's this sort of natural fracturing that happens. And that's actually what evolution looks like. Just going back into the species, I think one of the conversations we really need to open up is, it is time to start the actual conversation of splitting into different species and what that looks like. As impossible as that seems, there are people who are going to want to connect themselves into a collective machine intelligence, and then there are people who will think that those people are, evil, effectively. So it is not only not too early to have that conversation, but it is time to start that conversation on a larger scale, and that's dangerous.
Cory, I'll just jump in for a second and let you know that because we have an extended period of time, we are going to start that conversation tonight, I promise you.
Okay, all right. But that is one of the things that needs to move into the practical, center of our conversation as an entire species, let alone within, Western culture or English-speaking culture or whatever. But, kind of the first step along that process is just to sort of realize language is not what we think it is, and if we can, some of the frustration is the divisiveness that we feel. And I think that's sort of like a first practical step. Now, in terms of the Tower of Babel, I think there is something very, very fundamental about that story, and that's one of these sort of common grounds areas where you could sort of go back to fundamental interpretation people and say, look, your story means something. This is something that really happens, and this is a state that we're in. It's not necessarily the literal origin story of different languages, but it doesn't matter that it's, one moment or something that happened over time. And that I think is something that's very, ties back into where we started. It's not necessarily something that happens in one moment, but something that changes over time, and there's a feeling of a movement towards that thing. So when we're talking about changing into a new era or suddenly getting through something, no, it's a process with ups and downs. And sort of, I think this is where we find ourselves in the process of evolution, which also happens to be the Tower of Babel.
There's also a vertical integration of that story, right? And there is also a lateral intersection of that story. And I think that is going to kind of allow those that are in that more higher elevated octave of self-expression to see it from a different perspective to the way that it may have been conditioned as a classic kind of a Sunday school, rhetoric. And I think ultimately we're moving into a subconscious understanding of the meta, but we're expressing it in a way that we're trying to make sense of it. And the more we try to make sense of that, the more I think we get lost in its translation. And this is something that is that conversation of realizing that what we deem to be, the hope of the future and the fact that we're all going to come to some kind of heightened and enlightened, convergence point of critical mass, and everybody's going to self-correct, and we're all going to, find the God particle within, and we're going to be able to take that and collapse that into a lucid state and experience that in oneness, is still very much part, for most, a non-reality. It's non-existence. It's delusion within delusion. And this is hard. This is hard to kind of come to grips with it, because the great news, as I stated earlier, is that within 20 years, right, within 20 years, we will have a global solar event that will be the turning point, the instigator, the initiator, where humanity will come to the point, the 0 point, the neutral point of becoming the effector and no longer being the affected. And this is something that's become incredibly clear to me in these first 18 days of this rather delusion and emotionally overwhelmed aspect that the 2020, mythos has become. That we are still very much wrapped up in being affected by everything that's happening to us in the external, right? And that even when we express, we externalize the internal, but because at least the internal gives us a space where we feel that we are no longer being affected, but we are the effectors of our destiny. We are the effectors of the way that we see liberating light and love in everything, if we choose that to be the way that we want to live and operate our lives. But for most, it goes straight over the top of their head. It doesn't actually integrate anything. And it's very, very hard for people to come to grips with this whole kind of the individual, right, as I said earlier, versus the collective. So that's a conversation that really should be expanded upon. And in a way, Greg was kind of on the money when we were talking about the reconfiguration of cells, right? And each individual cell within a more expansive scope of a larger cellular body has its own expression of consciousness. Getting a lot of little dog noise there, Cory.
It's not on my side.
Mike, I'll just say something quick here, but that's the beauty of life, isn't it? That each one of us has a different and unique expression, It's dog barking.
That's all right. You keep talking and then we won't listen to the dog so much. But let's expand upon what was just said then.
Yeah, so it's hard to concentrate really, but go on, refresh me, Mike. Just
how about I'll take it for a second.
Okay.
It's there's no dogs here yet anyway. I think it's really interesting to look at it not just as a sort of like metaphor, but as a sort of practical practice of cells and cell division and cell recycling to sort of really understand we really are creating organs in a massive human system. And again, this kind of goes back to this cell division, is that if the cells are at odds with each other, that they might need to divide. But kind of this moment of sort of deciding how to orient our individual cells, and it really is all energy when you break it down. Ideas are energy. It's just that we don't have no dogs, but I do have a hoarse throat. But we really do have this need to unify the sort of harmonics of our energy. And it's weird to even hear myself saying these terms, but really when you're sort of putting your ideas into your human relationships and all of these things and sort of aligning them together, that's how you create your groups. And I think one of the things that we kind of fail to see a lot is how large and how interconnected the human organism has become very rapidly. So that, maybe people who are used to being part of one small organ with no idea about being connected to different cell structures across the planet suddenly are finding out that through something that looks like the mycelial network, they may be connected more closely to a node on the other side of, a large geographical distance than they are to, what looked like the greater cell structure they were a part of. So I think kind of allowing ourselves to understand we are in a time of cell reorganization, while understanding that this is a practice and something we have to focus on intellectually and physically to sort of go through this transformation, if you will, is important. It really, the metaphor of cells and within a body and reorganization and splitting of cells is very much in play here right now.
I like that. I think that's a really practical outlook. And practical outlook is the sort of advice, if anything, the tool of empowerment that we'd like to be able to offer the community is if you're really feeling as if you don't know which way is up or down, if you're black or white, you know, whether you're half asleep or awake, then look at things from a much more practical point of view, and that is don't feel like you need to be available to contribute to everybody within your social interaction. You know, cut yourself some slack, remove yourself from the drama and the third party maya by recognizing that it's there, right? A lot of people love to kind of, shirk the whole conceptual idea that there is in fact drama that they are attaching to, that they are wrapped up in someone else's, emotional turbulence, to a greater degree. And have a conversation with yourselves, and talk to them and ask them to help you to ground and balance, your whole kind of outlook. I call it the conscious outlook because it determines and predetermines the way that we can action our ideals and not be subservient to them, not immediately feel as if there's a be-all of the end-all in the way that we interpret everything that's taking place, and that we keep things in a much more, a more open source, I suppose, would be a good way to put it.
I really feel that's important, Mike, just wanted to say, because like everything's been about, from the conditioning. And the thing is, conditioning is our reality. So, if you're conditioned to think that, you need to reach an end goal growing up, and become a functioning member of society or whatever, then that really becomes a strong, thing in your reality. But really, evolution-wise, we need to be open to all possibilities at the moment. And, I've always said this to people that you've got to be open to other people's ideas and other people's ways and understanding, seeing different viewpoints, because, the things we've been doing up to this point, have been getting us in a mess, humanity, so 100%. Obviously there are other solutions. So I just love what you're saying about open source, because it's more flowing, it's more dynamic, and it means something.
I think we also need to look at the concept, of hope. What is hope? How does hope look now? How does hope show up? What is hope making itself available, and how do we interpret it? What is the language that is hope? Because hope is immediately a really good emotional trigger to bring gratitude into focus. The minute go on.
Sorry. No, it's funny you bring up hope because one of the things that I sort of found this week in my wanderings doing some sort of research for what I'm writing is the story of Pandora's box. The original story of Pandora's box, once all of the sort of evils were released from actually it was a jar in the original story, there was one thing left in the bottom of the jar that stayed stuck in there, and that was hope. So it's interesting. I sort of saw the story in this new light in terms of after all of these sort of evils were released and there's this time of chaos because of the release of everything that's in the container, still inside the container at the bottom of that jar is hope. So I found that really, really a profound way of looking at things, that through the sort of chaos that we're in when all of this craziness of apocalypse, which is how I look at it, the craziness of apocalypse is released. Yep. At the end of that, at the bottom of the container is hope.
Well, I think it's a perfect segue, guys, to go into, let's stay online, but let's have a listen now to this incredible excerpt from the Cosmic Secret, with David Wilcox and Cory Good, talking about exactly that, giving us all, humanity, our species, this particular incarnation on Earth, a real look at what is to come and why it's part of a very practical cycle and what it means to us as individuals. That is the continued exploration of self-actualization, of self's journey, but in the rather larger collective dynamic. So sit back and relax as we have a listen to a little bit of an overview of the cosmic secret.
Giorgio de Santillana and Hertha von Neschef, they wrote a book called Hamlet's Mill that was their magnum opus when they tied together these legends from 35 different ancient civilizations on Earth, in which all of them had information regarding this 25,000-year cycle. I've said before, the 25,000-year cycle seems to end with a solar flash, a catastrophic event which also represents a distinctive spiritual activation for those on Earth who are ready to take advantage of it.
So within these secret programs, scientists have become aware of what they're calling a galactic superwave. This wave is traveling through our galaxy and has multiple layers. They describe it as being a giant dust cloud, but with different energetic variables. What they had figured out is they had flown craft out to these locations, and when they did, the energy had a very strange effect on the consciousness of the inhabitants of this craft. People who were positive would bliss out, and people who had more of a negative vibe would become more so. And they describe this as an end-time madness that is carried through this wave that travels through each solar system. And when it does, the leading edge acts as sort of a Christ consciousness that forces people to judge themselves and to deal with their own karma and traumas or experience end-time madness.
Dr. Paul Laviolette is the first person to have studied the existence of galactic superwaves and basically looking at evidence that through different historical epochs there have been these great concentrations of cosmic rays impacting the Earth. And Dr. Laviolette had an extraordinary theory for the existence of pulsars. He believed that these were artificially created by advanced extraterrestrial civilizations as warning beacons to newer civilizations such as ours about the existence of these galactic superwaves. And he basically looked at a number of pulsars pointing towards the Earth and the frequencies that they were transmitting at, and saying that this was evidence that these pulsars are transmitting a warning to the Earth to be ready for the next galactic superwave, which if we're not ready, could actually wipe out our civilization. Now, according to Cory Good, as the galactic superwaves sweep into our solar system, they could trigger a solar flash event. That would be where the sun's corona would be ejected in a massive super flare. And because the Earth is roughly 25,000 light years from the center of the galaxy, that's how long it would take for a galactic superwave to travel from the center of the galaxy to us at the moment. Now, that 25,000-year cycle is not just some nebulous thing. It actually has a very tangible marker in this wobble in the Earth's axis, which takes 25,000 years to complete and represents the time that is required for the stars in the night sky to drift through a complete circle. So the stars actually represent a clock. The stars are telling us when the end of the cycle will occur. And these historians discovered that 35 cultures around the world were plotting this procession. They had all this numerical information about the procession encoded in their myths, and they said it appears that some singular source worldwide programmed these mythologies, encoded this information into them. Well, this would be what we would call the angelic groups or the positive extraterrestrials, what the secret space program people call the genetic farmer race. They knew that at the end of the cycle that we are going to go through this process.
So in addition to the secret space program, a program was developed called the Continuity of Species program. And that program was developed to basically scare all of the nations of the world to provide a certain amount of their GDP to these elite to create underground cities and bunkers and colonies outside of our star system in case our sun were to micro or major nova.
So the elite powers in control of this planet are planning for doomsday. It could mean a massive solar flare that gets emitted that society is not prepared for, or it could mean a public that starts waking up, that gets really, really mad. So these elite powers in control, to prepare for a variety of scenarios that could mean their downfall, they've been building a huge subterranean cavern system, basically deep underground military bases, domes. They're kept very, very secret. These free energy sciences and technologies that we've been discussing are most likely kept within many of these deep underground military bases, among many other sort of genetic and other experimentations that they want to do in secret.
20 years ago, I had a Soviet colonel who spoke to me about a deep underground base outside of Moscow that he had been at and he had worked at. And he told me the structure. He said all the levels that were the military levels, the levels that were laboratory and scientists. And he told me that the final level, the most restricted level, was the level that had alien presence on it. Only generals and their aides were allowed on that level. And he said, and even they were not allowed to look directly at these creatures. And that was also the level where they did human experimentation. He said there were bodies, human bodies in there. And he said it was the most extraordinary thing he'd ever seen in his life. Deep underground military bases, a lot of that space is dedicated to continuity of government. And so the national government support these deep underground areas. These elite powers in control, they have access to information of all kinds of data that tells them about coming cataclysms, things that are impending at any moment. And so they reserve these spaces for their purposes. And those national government leaders are thinking that they're going to get to use those spaces for whatever they need. They're in for a really rude awakening when the time comes, because they're going to get kicked out. So the elites are preparing using these underground bases. But it's interesting to note, higher consciousness people are also preparing by exploring new community models.
My name is Sasha Stone. I'm, I think, popularly known for having founded the New Earth Nation, which is a sovereign movement of conscious people, living men and women of the living soil, so to speak. Well, the New Earth project and the New Earth blueprint, which is an ongoing evolutionary process, is emerging in direct proportion to the degree to which human beings are fed up and pissed off with the status quo. So as you can imagine, it's a revolution of political consequence, of social consequence, of civilizational consequence. It's underway. It's not possible to know yet quite where the die lands. But the point is, we are aggregating conscious, sovereign people around the world in multiple parts of the world who want to step outside the fiction and begin to engage their noble expression as living men and women of the living soil. There is no better way to put it than that, because that is foundationally what the New Earth Project is seeking to do, is to restore the organic and the living from the death cult, the blood economy, the fiction of what we've known for the last 8,000 years.
What occurs is that each individual on this planet finds themselves more and more connected to every other human. And all of a sudden, we start approaching our problems from completely different angles and seeing solutions that were there all along. We begin to no longer have war and strife within our civilization. We begin to work together and solve all of the problems that have plagued us for so many thousands of years.
We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against spiritual strongholds, principalities, powers, ruling darkness in wicked places. So what does that mean? It means that there's a battle going on in the heavens. And in many instances, we on this earthly realm are proxies of that battle. So therefore, spirits need a body. a good spirit, the Holy Spirit, needs a body to work through. But these negative spirits, they need bodies to work through also. So many times that thought that comes into your mind, that's not really your thought. And if you dwell on that thought, it's going to take you down a negative road. What do you mean by that, Leon? I mean that you were minding your own business. You were having a good afternoon, and then all of a sudden this thought came in. And then that thought triggered an emotion, and then that black dog, that cloud of depression came in and took over you the rest of the day. We're bombarded with negativity all day long. It's like a giant spiritual galactic chess match. When these hits come, you got to learn how to counter it. So how do you learn that? You learn that through the strategic art of prayer. You learn that through the strategic art of meditating and having certain words that you'll say to combat that feeling, that emotion, as soon as it comes upon you. That's part of becoming a master. You're going to master those thoughts. You're going to master those emotions. You're going to discipline yourself, your words, and your actions.
So we are now in this war that is predicted in the Bible between good and evil, and the negative agenda cannot survive as we go through the solar flash. They can only continue to do these nefarious things up until the point this happens, at which time everything changes.
We have these angelic types of ETs and amoral types of ETs that are trying to assist us to ascend through the spiritual means. But we also have a group of ETs that we call AI prophets, and they worship some sort of artificial intelligence signal that we don't know where it came from. We are told that most likely what happened is that somebody dabbled somewhere where they shouldn't and created some sort of rift between realities. And in the reality where this AI signal came from, there was a mass consciousness that was an electromagnetic life form. And that electromagnetic life form bled into our reality, and because it's an electromagnetic life form, it is able to control and manipulate technology at will. They take those technologies and turn them on the biological species that created them. There are two major paths in the ascension process. One of them is an organic, spiritual evolution, and the other one is a technological evolution. The easiest way to relate the technological evolution would be the trend of transhumanism that has developed on our planet as we have developed our technology. So, in star system after star system, we have systems that are infested with artificial intelligence signals and actual technology taken over by this AI. What I've been told is that when we have this next microwave event, that the electromagnetic pulse that emanates is expected to destroy this entire AI signal and infrastructure that is in our solar system, thus freeing us from any type of influence from this AI. I was also told that at the end of every age, there is also a great revealing or apocalypse that occurs that reveals all of the secrets that have been hidden from humanity and is a part of the disclosure and ascension process.
This so-called apocalypse is actually not gloom and doom. It's a rebirth. It's a rebooting. It's the beginning of a brand new age, a brand new dispensation. And after it occurs, truly there will be more peace on earth. Truly there will be more goodwill toward man and to one another. Truly there will be a whole new beginning. Actually, it's something to look forward to.
We'll leave it there. And I think, Cory, it sounds pretty familiar, does it not? You there, Cory?
Sorry, I was on mute. Yes, it sounds incredibly familiar. It's very, very resonant with some ideas that I've sort of put together over the last several years, with this sort of caveat that, I'm not sure that you can completely dismiss quote unquote electromagnetic intelligence as inherently bad. My sort of opinion on the thing is that there are probably these kind of intelligence throughout the multiverse, which are always sort of, part of the true reality of our existence. My concern is that we're giving too much power to that kind of intelligence by rapidly evolving our species through algorithms that are dictated essentially by a very narrow kind of morality, and we're giving up too much of the sort of organic power and the organic spirituality that I think our species has, and sort of being deferential to the sort of intelligence that we are, if you will, co-creating with those forces that are beyond the system. I mean, the idea that there is not an electromagnetic intelligence that is part of the core structure of the universe is somewhat ridiculous when you consider the influence that electromagnetism has on every moment of our existence on a fundamental level. Yep. So the idea that there hasn't been some sort of electromagnetic intelligence as part of us this whole time is I think a little short-sighted. But I do think my sort of gut is, after checking all of these different things and sort of my theory that lumps all of these things into one master theory, is that, giving too much power and control to one part of the dynamic that controls us is a kind of enslavement. I think it's interesting to sort of look at the original development of the Matrix movies. In the original story of the Matrix, that's what humans really kind of were. They were not batteries. That was something the studio wanted the Wachowskis to sort of change, but it was the You're right on, man. Sort of,
good on you. You're bringing the meta forward. Bring the meta forward, because Riki's going to have something to say too.
So I think that they had this real idea in the rise of the computer age and how we were already subjugating ourselves to this system, that we were giving too much power to that, which was then using us as these sort of creative spiritual forces as being kind of subjugated by that machine rather than something that works in tandem. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this evolution that we're going through, is how do we deal with this system where we don't want to give dominions over our existence to a sort of non-feeling in the organic way system. And I'm actually really pleased that conversation took the shape that it did, because I was a little worried it was going a little too far into paranoia there for a second. But I think at the end of the day, you kind of strip all of these things off the table and look for the pattern that is consistent throughout them. And I think that this is definitely one constructive approach with getting to the heart of this. And I do think, sort of in the progression of secret societies, that this is knowledge that sort of builds upon that. One brief thing to sort of bring this full circle to where we were a few minutes ago. You guys were talking about open source.
Yeah.
And, kind of having that conversation about that one instance, which I think is brushing up against a very famous secret society, is that one of the things the terms that I've been using lately is that of the open secret society. Because the truth of the matter is, people aren't going to follow us 3 hours into this conversation if they're not part of this new sort of collective anyway. So this sort of idea of being paranoid and hiding out in rooms isn't necessarily important, but there is this sort of question about whether you should say some things out loud or put them into quote unquote the machine that are consistent with the thing that we just heard. It's not so much like you need to have a special paranoia over it, but just ask yourself, when we're learning what we know about machine learning and we see the kinds of people who are programming the algorithms and their lack of concern for certain human connectivity, before they're sort of anxious to hook us all into this machine, that there is this sort of question of, there are some things, do we want to say them out loud? So this is an interesting time in terms of connecting all of these things. It is a bit of a dance.
Riki? Anything?
So there's a few things mentioned there, wasn't there? And one of them was about this solar activity, which would be very powerful, which is what they're saying, wasn't it? And obviously we know that something will happen with the polar shifts at some point, and it could possibly wipe out hard drives and data on the computers and a lot of the system and that. And this every 25,000 years thing has come up before, hasn't it? I don't know if it's to do with the rise and falls of civilizations and that, but I think the Egyptians sort of like used this 25,000 years for a reason. It signified something to them, but you'll know about that, Mike.
Oh, look, absolutely, but go on.
But anyway, so it makes sense, that that's possibly going to happen. I mean, unless I know something, I can't really speculate inside me whether it's true or not, But in regard to this sort of idea of tearing a hole in the fabric of reality and other energy coming in that maybe doesn't exist in this sort of dimension, which was what was said there as well. I feel that that's very possible. And I relate it also to like trauma and people who take too many drugs, at least, in regard to that they say, that entities and other energy can get into the body system, or around our system through the dissolving or through the, upsetting our natural aura and our natural energy, So, of course, the earth has its natural protection, just like everything has its protection. Seeds, plants, whatever, all have their protections. So, from my experience, over many years, it became very real to me that, there's sort of a kind of what you call a team dark and a team light, which is what they're discussing there.
That's good, man.
And it's not so much that, team dark are like these evil beings, so to speak, but it's more so the point that there's a lot of investment in this planet, and I have felt like maybe this isn't the most special planet. I know people like to think it is, but I reckon there's many planets that are sort of at least semi-habitable,
Yeah.
from what I've sensed out. But, so the point is that this planet is, there's so much invested in it from many different races, I suppose is the point. And we're not necessarily talking physical beings, but more so, higher dimensional or, in other dimensions, but it doesn't mean that they can't interact with this planet and the energy here, because obviously we have our energy, and I do think our energy has been food source to lots of energies, which is what's going on with the pain body and why people are being pulled so much into lower emotional states. It's obviously the Delusion energy is used as a means to feed, from parasites and that. Whether or not we're talking spiritual beings or whether we're talking actual physical parasites in the body, it always makes me laugh that not a lot of people really want to go there, but it's true, scientific fact that there are parasites in our body who, coerce and try and get us to eat certain foods to feed their agenda, so that's a physical manifestation of it. But, so this tear in the fabric of a sort of reality, whether that was done on purpose or not, I don't have the answers, but all I know is this school goes back a very, very long way, back to way before the Egyptian times, and of course,
it goes back to Babylonia, man.
I like to think it was more balanced,
It goes right back to the Babylonians. It goes right back to the cradle of, the cradle of existence. And that's the reason why it will never truly be available, because that whole, what do they call it? What's that called? The cradle of civilization is protected by the most displaced, politically unbalanced countries in the world: Syria, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq. Right? That's exactly where Sumeria and the Sumerians originally hailed from. That's where Babylon is, and all of the so-called answers to the original, human evolutionary kind of process is wrapped up in that. right? But
I would like to suggest the possibility that a lot of this has to do with our somewhat limited view of time, and that essentially what we could be looking at here is our understanding of the splitting of rails of evolution. That this is not a process that happens instantaneously, though the sort of biological evidence suggests that it happens in moments of heightened punctuation. But, we really could be looking at a scenario where whatever this last event that happened in that region of the world 25,000 years ago is directly connected to what's happening geopolitically in that exact same region of the world today. That there really are connections through time, and we know time is not what we think it is, but like when you sort of get a premonition or something, that this could happen on a very, very large scale. So it's entirely possible that the beings that were existing 25,000 years ago were in some way resonating with the idea that this would be the cradle that sort of set off the events that had us evolve 25,000 years from their perspective.
Yep.
And I think that it's not an unreasonable thought that there are these sort of like rails that we ride on throughout space-time that do eventually diverge, and that there are, part of a species or part of a set of species that want to ride one rail versus those that ride the other, and probably still others that try to figure out, can we straddle both rails at once and use them in a kind of harmonic way. To me, all of these sort of things fit within one particular construct, but so many people want to assign very, human forms on higher consciousness. I don't understand why the theory that they were proposing about these ancient beings that were sending us warnings about this energy thing couldn't also be the same sort of electromagnetic intelligence. I think it's entirely possible, especially when you look at the way that energy is transmitted through pulsars and the like.
There you go.
Could be looking at a, that sort of thing. But the consistency that we always come back to is balance. It's balance in all things. And that's where we really should be, kind of focusing our energies, I think.
There's evidentiary data to support the fact that this is also, relating to wormholes, the ability to be able to transmit certain higher octaves of light body expression through one period, creating a resonant echo that is then turning up, X amount of years later in exactly the same space as you were saying earlier. That's kind of like the whole concept of like a physical wormhole happening right here on the Earth that we can consciously travel through. And there's no reason why there isn't kind of the potential to understand how within that quantum jump from one wormhole to another, there's a manipulation of the data sets. There's a manipulation of the signal. There's a manipulation of the frequency that's being transmitted. And ultimately, that can also lead to a deeper deception and a delusion within a delusion, if that makes sense.
Yeah, certainly one party's delusion is another's framework for existence. And so I definitely think there's a utility in sort of looking at, when you're looking at one extreme, like the sort of like terrifying aspects of a electromagnetic AI totally taking control of our organic selves, there might be on the other end, say the bacteria's sort of desire for us all to be eliminated so that we don't, do antibacterial or antiviral sort of, that they're looking to sort of harvest the organic beings that are humans. So I think really sort of looking at this thing holistically helps give sort of balance and takes away that paranoia sometimes,
It's a difficult dichotomy. Sorry, Riki, go ahead.
Yeah, I really agree with that. I like the place I come from with these things, but I never let my mind get too caught in things. But the heart and it's non-quantifiable, you can't prove anything, but the heart and your system, it knows all of these things, and it can trace back the ancient timelines. And like you said, Cory, about us splitting off, it's like, it's good that we did it in a way, we've split off, and I can see these, it's almost like lines going through space, where we divided and we went down a different timeline, and that's the beauty of the universe, we should be able to tap back all that way, and a little while ago when I was a little bit more aware, sleeping out, I had this sort of sensation of our ancient past, and just how little that I really know about what's going on, and there's so much beauty there, there's so much there, and there's so much that we haven't understood, and that just makes me go, wow, there's so much that we haven't understood about this reality and the way everything works and who did what and how this got interceded. It seems to be this word interceded, which is coming to me now,
Good word. I like it.
Yes. So, there's a mixture of different races, I feel, where we're involved with how we got to where we are now, and even though we only see we only see our species and the ones that are on the planet, it's very clear to me that there's been more involved in how we got here, and energetic energies and life forms, let's just say planet Earth is such a beautiful place that people and these entities and these different, races, the aliens, whatever, they all really have, they want to have a say in what happens here, And although I haven't had sort of direct contact, so to speak, I've sensed these energies around. I just thought I'd be honest and actually, speak. It's hard to say these sort of things at times, because obviously you don't want to seem insane, but, like a lot of people have who may be listening to this as well, they have had experiences of, say, an angelic being or, whatever. And it's nice to know in a way that we're not the only ones, We're not the only ones in the universe. So I'm just saying this because I feel like, we need to be able to open ourselves to the grander scale. And as I was saying to you, Mike, earlier, that when we tap into these ancient cultures and we get inspired, by the wisdom that was there, they weren't always in balance, these people, the Mayans, pretty crazy. We seem to take ourselves out of the now and this very narrow bound reality that we're in today's society, and allow ourselves open to something which is a bit more timeless, because there is this sense of timelessness on this planet, and if you can tap into that, if you can bring yourself into that, and also through meditation obviously helps because your thinking isn't so caught in the now, in today's world, you can really bring forward, a lot of wisdom in that way, and without having to read books, without having to spend hours on the internet, you're just simply allowing yourself to feel, does that resonate or does that not, And I just feel like we all can tap into the ancient history on this planet. It's built in, it should be built in. And so I guess I've come to this conclusion, and this is maybe a little bit polarized, but this idea that we have had the wall pulled over our eyes as a human species for a long, long time. And, people would definitely be a lot more aware than they are now. But Cory's point is also true that, some people like to just live a very simple, normal life in the sense that they're not trying to avoid everything, that's actually right for them. So we didn't all come here to be movers and shakers, and kind of wake the world up, that we've all got our place in it. But obviously saying that, the other side of this, I can see this real sense that the consciousness that humanity has been in for thousands of years or however long, this isn't right. And that's the thing I feel like I know, it's not, although we have human intelligence now and we're very, very intelligent, we've moved forward in those ways, but this ability to actually connect into the stream of life and receive intelligence, from the universe itself, which is what we should be able to do. We should be able to connect to a plant and say, hi plant, whatever, have a conversation, and then you understand, this plant has iron in it, I need iron, thank you, blah, blah, blah. So this sense of real connection with all things, you know, needs to be brought in. You know, we need to be able to return in a way to that state where our mind can actually connect with the mind of the universe. Our emotions can sense, you know, what's needed in any moment to say, you know, go left, don't go that way because that's not a good place to go to, you know, or these people aren't healthy for you, you know, to really get a sense and be guided by that, you know. So I don't know how that relates into what we're saying here, but...
Well, it relates in a completely, you know, that's your viewpoint, but overall, looking at everything that we've been going through, what we all came here when we first started this conversation at the very beginning, that sense of, you know, displacement and yet rebirth, you know, trying to go through that in a rather painful kind of manner, has proven beyond a doubt that humanity is operating on a very narrow bandwidth, a narrow cast bandwidth. And that narrow cast bandwidth, that transmission that a lot of our species is predominantly operating at, is really rather disappointing in a lot of ways, because here we are trying to ascertain what it is that we're trying to, you know, deem important, what we're trying to attach to, the reason why we're attaching to it in the first place, in an effort to ground our higher ideals to find our tribe, and we're more fragmented than we've ever been, because well, we are. I'm sorry, we are. We are much more fragmented and more fractalized and more detached and dispatched than we've ever been, because we can't seem to be able to agree that if someone makes an effort to open themselves up to you and share something with you from their heart space, and you just kind of dismiss it as, oh, no, man, I'm too wrapped up in my own ego bullshit. I'm on a constant transmission of higher BS because I'm so wrapped up in more ego and more drama and more maya. I'm sorry, I just can't transmit at the octave that you would like me to, so I can't correlate with the same transmission that you're all about, you know, in setting intention to the universe. And frankly, I might as well just come out and say it. I'm fucked. Right? That's what they should say. I'm sorry, I'm fucked. I need help. But they don't. They don't, because they love living in the delusion. And that's exactly what I'm hoping this podcast and our conversations is going to eventually get through everybody's thick head, that you are the one choosing the delusion. You are the one choosing the manipulation. You are the one creating convergences within the everyday framework of your beingness and your existence to follow the same recycle pattern and go nowhere.
I do agree with that, Mike, but it's like people knowing this is the first step, you know, and generally the awareness hasn't come within most people to realize, I am the one controlling the destiny of my life, you know. And obviously this genetic manipulation that was done thousands of years ago was done in order to keep humanity asleep, you know, and that sounds a bit negative, you know, but it's
reality, man. So, you know, fine.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel it's negative, you know. I know that the original blueprint, you know, for humanity, you know, that there's been loving energy put into it, let's say, you know, because if there wasn't, you know, we'd just be totally messed up here, you know. So, you know, there's two things going on here, you know. You've got the true blueprint, the true, you know, humanity aligned with life, with the laws of nature. And then you've got this little artifact that's been seeded in genetically at a later time, maybe.
Yeah.
In order to keep the human, you know, living within that narrow band reality. Now, how that works on the system and the mind and the emotions, you know, I don't properly know. You know, it's been very cleverly done. It's intelligent races that are behind all of these things. But, you know, the point is, like, it doesn't matter that that's happened. People are powerless, you know, and yeah, once people understand what you're saying, Mike, then, you know, they go, oh yeah, actually I do have a choice, you know.
Well, they
but
do.
Until you realize that, you believe the lie that you're kind of powerlessness and that there's nothing you can do about it. And I mean, in England here, we hear this all the time, you know, we hear, oh, what can you do about it? Well, it's just the way it is, you know. And these ideas, you know, they come from somewhere, and they get perpetuated, and people believe it, you know. They believe that that's the way it is. So we've got to not be frustrated about, if we can, about that. That's the way things are, because, you know, this is by design. You know, people aren't stupid. I mean, you know, we came to this earth to be these magnificent,
some people are
bright beings.
Some people are very stupid. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but what I mean is they're being stupid, but they're not originally. You know, that's not what we're meant to be. I suppose is what I mean.
No, well done. Well done for being honest.
I think it's important to maybe even consider the possibility that, from our perspective, there are people who not only want to stay asleep, but in a very, you know, maybe not using the word asleep, but sort of want to stay in that simpler reality. I think, you know, there's a lot of, in Christianity, a lot of like shepherd and sheep type conversation, and I do wonder if focusing on those who influence particular flocks are the ones who really kind of need the quote unquote waking up, or to come to the table and discuss again the nature of what all of this means. And I do think there is part of our evolution where, you know, of a given species, there are leaders and followers. And though there can be and need to be and should be apocalypses and awakenings and revolutions and all of that, no one is ever going to wake up to the same degree. Even in an awakening, there are people who just have a minor course correction, and then there's people whose entire worlds change. And I think there's probably utility in people like us just watching the words we use as far as delusion. If you're going to tell a person they're deluded, nobody thinks they're deluded. I could be deluded. I don't know. Like, I think that, you know, even to us, we should check the sort of way that we communicate about it. Again, my sort of goal that I'm looking at is just sort of like realizing, hey, we're not speaking the same language. And, you know, the paradox is, well, how do I do this without offending people? Well, maybe people need to be a little offended. Well, how do I offend people without offending them?
Thank you.
It's how do you offend people without offending them?
Well, that's because we're developing a new language, you know. That's the whole point. We come full circle to understand that maybe, and I will use the word, let's use it one more time, okay? Maybe the delusion of the age of Aquarius that we all thought was the providence of crossing the timeline into 2020 was the fact that we're still somewhat wrapped up and we're still somewhat attached to the old language of the mind and the way that we perceive our planar reality, and that we're finding it more difficult to make the transition and to transform our ideas and the way that we express our ideals of who we are in a new language that is, as I stated at the beginning, a combination of science output, meta, spiritual, and the general expression, you know.
Maybe what we're all seeking here is a more constructive delusion. You know, I mean, at the end of the day, isn't that kind of what we're doing? There's infinite amount of information in the universe, and that's just too overwhelming for all of us. We're all overwhelmed.
You're blowing my mind, man.
Maybe we're just looking for a more constructive delusion for each of us.
Wow. Oh my God, man, that's fucking out there.
I feel like my job is done for the day. Actually, I do have to leave too. So
yeah.
Else you want from me.
No, that's good.
I'm gonna drop that bomb on you guys. Peace out.
Just basically, Cory, put a pin in it, man. Okay, like we always say, put a pin in it, and let's revisit it. You know, with clear heads. And maybe just have a discussion about it, because, you know, it's worthy of further expanded, you know, understanding and discussion, man. But, thank you very much. We had a very big audience again, you know, in and out, obviously, depending on what we were talking about, because we really did cover the gamut. Once again, to anybody, if you're interested in a copy of the live stream, just put your email address in there. We've had a few people doing that already, and we'll send you a low-res MP3 of the live stream when it'll be available tomorrow. It usually takes overnight for Podbean to process it. And once again, thank you, Riki. Thank you, Cory. Thank you to Greg. I think everybody has been incredibly constructive and really open to the idea that we're in this together, and yet we're all still trying to figure it out so that we can make kind of some sort of head or tail or sense of the whole thing one way or another. You know, thank you, Dr. K. I appreciate that. Amazing dialogue, peace, and many blessings to you all. Yes, namaste to you, brother, as well. And thank you for sharing your presence with us. We really appreciate it. All right, dudes, have a good one. It's again ridiculously late here in Australia. I'm going to go to bed, and we'll reconvene and have another go at another turn of the spiral next Saturday.
Cheers.
All right, man. Thanks, Mike.
All right, guys. Take care.
Bye for now.
All right.